Well, good morning, Therapy Flow community. We're back with a little less technical conversation today, but one that is equally important to practice growth. I think we spend a lot of time on a weekly basis probably unpacking technical details on marketing, on analytics, on CRMs, on whatever else. And today, I think we're going to change notes a little bit and talk about some impact points that affect the growth of your practice. And the longer you own a business, the larger your practice gets, the more opportunities you have, the more you're actually opened up to the thing that we're going to be discussing today. And definitely, there's 5 points that we're going to be hitting today. And I think number 5 is probably going to be the most important. So, of course, we're going to end on it. And as a little preview, it just has to do with your emotional state when you're growing your business and something that everyone struggles with and how to confront it. So without further ado, we're going to be unpacking shiny objects today. Shiny objects. The process in which we find new, adventurous, exciting things that divert our attention, that make us task switch, that make us go off of the critical path that we should actually be staying consistent with. And I think it's a nuanced topic because it's very hard sometimes to internalize and know, hey, do I need to switch strategies and adjust because there's so much of adjustment that has to be taken when you're building something new for the first time? Or am I getting distracted and am I losing focus on the things that are going to make me successful? And I just need to be patient and stick to the thing that I'm currently doing. So we're going to be unpacking 5 variations of a shiny object to give you a little bit of context, give you some internal language to parse out whether change needs to take place for success or whether shiny objects are entering in and killing your momentum.
Yeah, the first one here is going to be called recency bias. So this is a psychological bias, if you will, that humans tend to have, and I think it's one that we need to be all very aware of. And it's that we will over prioritize, or we tend to believe that the newer piece of information is more important than older pieces of information. We tend to believe that because something was just learned, that it has to be, that is the more better way or the newer way to implement things, and it will improve you or make you move faster. What that ends up doing is you end up looking at a new idea or a new project or a new piece of software or a new product or a new tactic, and you hyper prioritize that as a vehicle versus your old vehicle. And so it's the grass is greener. It's the grass is greener on the other side, right? We've got this idea. Is the grass greener on the other side? You go to the other side and realize, hey, it was the same thing. But you took the time to cross the bridge, and now you lost momentum, you lost steam, you lost all kinds of stuff. And so recency bias will really kill you if you switch a lot. If you switch a lot and you don't have a maybe data-based reason why switching may be actually a higher, may move you faster, I'll say, than your current process.
Yeah, I think, AI is one of those things where in some scenarios, it does have the propensity to massively move you forward. But in most situations, it sounds like a cool new thing that has all of these promises. And there are some significant applications, but if you aren't a coder, if you don't have a technically advanced team, a lot of the upside of AI right now is locked behind a much higher technical capacity. So thinking about all this cool new AI chatbot you can implement into your business, or fill of all the things that are quote unquote possible with AI that you might be in ads for, or think about with ChatGPT, it's a lot of fluff. It actually is pulling you away from the things that need your attention, that will really matter to the growth of your business in the next 4 to 12 weeks or the 4 to 12 months. And the applications are going to come when the applications are going to come. So popping in and being like, oh man, I got to try this new AI note taker because that's going to speed things up, and you give it a try and you implement it and it's kind of only okay. And then you just go back to the old way. That is recency bias costing you valuable time where you should have just stayed dedicated to the same thing. And like, we are all so collectively susceptible to this process because we're constantly optimizing for the new best thing in every other part of our life. And I think more often than not, it's just not the case when you're trying to execute on a current plan in your business. And that kind of leads into the next one, which is complexity or difficulty. Often we go to look for a new thing, a new solution, a new way to dig in when things are really hard or really complex. You know, the classic, there has to be a better way, which there might be, but there will always be an inflection point in a strategy, in a business growth period where you reach the height of difficulty for that specific thing. Let's take ads or social media on a marketing level. Let's take improving your sales process or recruiting great quality clinicians. It doesn't matter which strategy you choose or which option you're going against or which software, there will always be an inflection point where it becomes a little bit more complex and difficult than we want to sit in. And then we have a choice. Do we push in or do we pull out and find an easier way?
Yeah, this one, I always think of this as like this is like a big wall in front of you. And the complexity idea here is you have to make it through the wall. Like no matter what, if you want a successful business, you have to make it through this wall. And you have no idea how to get through the wall. You can try, you have no tools, no ladder, right? There's no way to climb over it. It's infinitely stretched long. You can try chipping away at it. You can try digging under, but you have to make it through that wall. And no matter what choice you make, you can eventually get through the wall, or you can eventually find yourself on the other side if you just commit to figuring out how to get through the wall. And some people might be like, well, I'm going to dig under the wall. And then they just start digging and they go and they go and they go and they go until they get under the wall. Right. And then some people are like, I'm going to walk around the wall, and they just go and go and go and go. Okay. So maybe this isn't infinitely large, but they go and go and go. And eventually they get around this huge wall. Right. And sometimes we are more suited to go in one direction versus another direction. One of your peers may decide to go under the wall, and maybe that's not where you're suited to go. Maybe you're supposed to chip through the middle of the wall, right? So every task has its level of complexity, and most solutions that you know of work to some degree. You just have to commit to going through it. And here's the kicker. If you decide early that you're going to go under the wall, and then you decide that, you know what, I think I'm going to actually climb over the wall, you have to get all the way out and then climb over. So you have to do extra work just to recommit and find a new process typically. And so this is you have obstacles in your way. You're running a business. You're doing things that are new. And you have to figure out how to recruit clinicians. If you want to recruit clinicians and grow, you have to figure out how to have a good intake process that works with strangers and not just referrals. If you want to grow, you have to figure these things out. And if you don't figure it out, or if you resent the process, you're never going to figure it out.
Yeah. I think this is probably the number one area where it feels like you're taking a step back in order to innovate and grow the business. And this is probably how I experience something is complex. It's difficult. It's harder than I want it to be. So I take a step back, I come out of the hole, so to speak, being like, oh man, I hit a rock in my tunnel. What am I going to do here? And then what actually happens, instead of innovating, I go work on a different wall. I go work on a different strategy. I stop trying to actually solve the marketing problem that I was trying to solve with that strategy, and I go work on a different part of the business because I'm actually just avoiding the responsibility of solving the problem in front of me. If you have a recruitment problem, if you don't have enough clinicians to take the leads that you're getting, that recruitment problem will always be your number one bottleneck. And time and time again, and I've done it in my own business. You see that problem, and then you go work in a different part of your business that matters less. It's still an important piece. It's still something that probably needs work on, but that's when it's a difficulty. Another part of your business, another strategy, another outcomes being a shiny object versus sitting there and strategizing. This is hard. This is complex. I don't have the skills, the tools to move this thing in my tunnel. How do I make this easier? Those are the innovating questions to tackle the problem that's in front of you versus pulling all the way back, actually just going to someplace else entirely. And sometimes when things are really hard, you lie to yourself. I lie to myself and I change my goal altogether. Oh, it didn't really matter. Didn't really matter if I reached that goal. It didn't really matter if I got that many booked appointments. It didn't really matter if I had a team that hard. And like it's an internal conversation about actually just changing the goalposts of the problems you were trying to solve.
I think that's a really good segue with changing the goalposts into maybe the third marker here, which is actually jealousy.
Yeah.
Jealousy and looking at other people, looking at competitors, looking at how other people are doing it, taking advice maybe from people who haven't been there before. I think is maybe sort of a form of jealousy, or it'll kind of fit into this
Yeah.
bucket. I'll include it here. But essentially, comparison or taking ideas from places that probably you shouldn't be taking ideas from. And I think this one's a weird one because I think we have an inclination to think we're savvy by looking at other people and seeing how they're doing it and seeing if we can replicate or produce in that capacity. But the hard truth is we are all unique. We are all different. We all have our own strengths and weaknesses. And I know that sometimes when you hear that, it comes across as like, yeah, we're all different. We're all unique. No, but seriously, in business, we all have really big strengths and weaknesses that really, really, really push us apart. Some of us have entire teams when others of us don't have teams at all. And so how can you try to replicate what a big practice does when you're not a big practice? Or how can a big practice replicate some of the things that a small practice does? This is one of the growing pains that big practices have is they act like they're a small practice still. And in fact, that keeps them small. And so in a lot of ways, comparison or looking at others instead of following the source of truth, which is your data, your strengths, and your synthesis of what's happening through that data, that's the most important metric for you in your practice, because that's just going to tell you the raw truth, the raw story. And then you have to find ideas and innovate on them for your practice so that you can transcend number three. You have to make the decisions for yourself. You have to think through the ideas. You have to get the data. You have to get the information, process it through the lens of you and your practice, you and your strengths, you and how you're acting through your marketplace, so that you can find the true signal of the noise instead of the noise.
Yeah. Simple recreation of someone else's process and strategy typically isn't enough because of what Attilio just said. There are unique, hidden, massively contributing factors to the what, the where, the how that made that process, their strategy, their thing successful. That doesn't mean it's not going to work for you, but you just have to know that there's tons of unknowables for why that specific process and strategy. I think one of my biggest pet peeves is listening to anyone talking about their experiencing their success or some of those things, but they're ignorant to the true thing that made them successful, their unique selling proposition or their unique skills that actually moved the whole thing forward. And you're like, it's never gonna work for me because that's not me. But that doesn't mean that there aren't stuff out there or objects or strategies out there to help you get your own results in the same way.
Yeah.
So I think part of that also then comes from impatience. I think this goes hand in hand with jealousy because we get impatient. Often, I get impatient with myself, but I think I get impatient when I compare to someone else in my life and I see them have something that I'm also trying to get, freedom, income, profit, something cool, sexy, whatever, right? It makes me impatient because of that jealousy or envy, but just impatience with the process overall. It's going slower than you want. It's harder than you want. Why aren't I getting the results sooner? Why isn't this strategy faster? Impatience gives you a wandering eye to go find something else that will move you forward faster. And typically, if moving into something else is coming from a source of impatience, that new thing will be a shiny object, not a strategy that will actually help you move forward.
It's funny. I actually relate impatience more to recency bias. I feel
Yeah.
like impatience is the number one reason why I look for other things or I hyper prioritize other things. There's this really interesting principle that I bring up pretty often from Simon Sinek. It's this idea that business is actually an infinite game versus a finite game. A finite game is a game that's like time, like basketball or soccer or chess or something, where there's a finite number of things you can do. There's a finite number of time that you're in the game, and then the game has a clear winner or loser or sometimes draw
Yeah.
at the end of that time. And that's not how business is. The point of business isn't to win or to lose or to draw. The point of business is simply to persist. It's simply to persist. So business doesn't fit within the parameters of a finite game. And so when we are impatient, we're trying to impart a finite game on our business, which is an infinite game. And when you start doing that, what happens is you make wrong decisions. You start chasing the closest dollar instead of maybe the biggest dollar, or the dollar that means that you're the most free, or the dollar that has the most profit, or the dollar that you stop chasing the thing that actually you wanted, and you start working and playing the game. This is the classic like hustler versus like business owner.
Yeah.
And so impatience will push you to do the wrong thing. Impatience is playing business like a finite game instead of an infinite game.
I think anytime I've been able to successfully move the goalposts to a further time horizon to get a payout, the business has always grown proportionately. What I mean by that is the day that I was able to move my attention from what do I need to make today or this week or this month to this quarter to this year to in the next couple of years, whatever it is, and then work on strategies that reflect that payout method. Think of like a newsletter as an example. The day that I started my newsletter, I had no expectation that for that first week, that 10th week, even that first 12 months, that it was going to be pay out successfully to the proportion of initial time and energy and creative input that I put into it. I knew the biggest dividends would come more than a year from now. But it would probably be worth it on a strategy level. And anytime you are able to move the goalposts in your business, a longer time horizon, sandwiched to something that gets a bigger payout. SEO could be a good example of that. The willingness to start now, do all of the work required for the next 2 years, and then get the payout. That is huge, and that's actually an advantage. So you have to think about it this way. Most people are impatient with their strategy, with their ads, with their marketing, with their recruitment, with their staff, all of it. And your patience can be an outsized advantage to building the practice that you want.
That's a good segue, I think, into our final point. Any cliffhangers or anything that we want to put before the last line? Number 5, guys. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it.
Number 5, guys. Fear of the unknown. So the unknown is really scary. And as entrepreneurs, we are on the forefront of an organization of yourself, an organization of people, an organization of a financial asset, and a steward of clients and potential clients and otherwise. And so as an entrepreneur, you're walking in front of the pack, and that can be kind of scary sometimes. You have a lot of decisions that rely on you and which direction you decide to walk. Sometimes you don't know if you're walking towards the edge of a cliff, and sometimes you don't know if you're walking towards a beautiful, potable lake. And here's the kicker: you're walking in the dark. So the nice thing is that you don't always have to be walking that much in the dark. If you start collecting data, if you start creating systems, if you insulate yourself with some smart people, some hardworking people, if you build something bigger than yourself, really,
Yeah.
the unknown starts disappearing a little bit.
Yeah. I think, you will always be on the edge of unknown or never done before. You've never bought that building before. You've never hired your 10th clinician before. You've never secured benefits for your company. You've never hired your first clinician and filled that caseload. You've never done paid ads or spent $10,000 a month on paid ads. And sometimes it's a small little incremental step. It's like, if you're cooking dinner and you're like, hey, I've added salt to other meals. Maybe if I add just a little bit of salt to this one, it will taste good. And it's like not much of a jump, but it's still a new thing. Pretty low risk. Other times you're like, I've never made this meal ever before. I don't know how it turns out, even if I'm trying to follow a proven recipe. And that's okay. But either way, when we apply it to shiny objects, that feeling, that sort of scare of the unknown or the intensity of the process can kind of make you step back and look for familiar things or easier things or different things, or just ignore the problem and work on other parts of the business. That emotional chaos, if we can't sustain sitting in that tension, I think of some big business moments where I felt inside of myself the tension was really high because I was surrounded by unfamiliar things that needed my attention. And I really wanted to go back to familiar places. Just scrolling on Facebook or watching TV is like simple, short-term, non-business shiny objects. So like, oh, that's better for me. Or even other familiar things. Maybe I should just recreate it how I previously did it. But if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. And that's where sitting in the tension, sitting in the uncomfortable feelings of unknown and never done before, and being able to still do the work, that will grow your practice more than anything else. The only way is through.
Yeah, I think of a couple like helpful mantras here, and it's those that are like, the only constant is change, right? When you're on the front, when you're on the precipice here, when you're building something for the first time, you don't know a lot. And I think being able to settle yourself, Josh, you were saying sit in it, right? Sit in it. If you're able to sit in this unknown, if you're able to sit and maybe find peace in the unknown, I think that's where you claim a lot of power back.
Yeah. And I want to give a bonus one and a final one. And this is especially for the larger, more developed businesses out there. When you first start, everything is new. But as you get larger, maybe the biggest things are new. The most important things that could grow the practice are new. But sometimes we let go of and we lose focus of staying consistent with all the things we already know and just keeping that hamster wheel running of all the pieces, systems, processes that previously undergirded our success. Business is cyclical. That's why it kind of gets more complex, even if it's simple mechanisms. There needs to be more of it to facilitate a team of 10 versus a team of 20 versus a team of 40 as you continue to grow. And so sometimes the shiny object at the end of it all can look like the big new thing when we just need to return to all of the current stuff and just do it better and at scale. Just do all the little stuff that we've already all doing and do all of it better and at scale. The application of our current stuff versus going back to kind of the first one, the recency bias, the new stuff. Staying dedicated to things that are working first can be a huge piece, because the larger you get, the more opportunity that there is out there to do different big things. Sometimes you just have to stack the chips that you have in front of you again and again and again.
Best of luck, guys. Stay on track this week and the following weeks.
This year, the following years.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next time. Cheers.
See y'all next time.